Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It was an ordinary afternoon when Thomas, a tech enthusiast, visited the Apple Store near his college campus. He just purchased a new MacBook and was hoping to get a few accessories, maybe some advice on software upgrades. The store was buzzing with activity, with customers eagerly exploring the latest gadgets and staff walking about, providing assistance. As he browsed the sleek, minimalist displays, something caught his attention. A small section of the store, tucked away in the corner, seemed oddly empty. The lights above it flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows on the walls. It was an area that seemed rarely visited by customers, and the air around it felt uncomfortably cold. Curious, Thomas decided to check it out, thinking it was just an oddity in the store's layout. He walked over, his footsteps echoing louder than usual in the otherwise quiet store. He glanced at the items on display, old Apple products that had long been discontinued. There were vintage iPods, outdated iPhones, and a few models of MacBooks that hadn't been in production for years. But one item in particular caught his eye: a shiny, unmarked device placed in the middle of the counter. It wasn't labeled, no Apple logo, just a plain silver object with an oddly smooth surface. Before he could reach out to inspect it further, a voice called from behind him. "Can I help you with something?" Startled, Thomas turned to see a store employee standing there, but the person didn't look like any of the staff he'd seen before. His face was pale, almost ghostly, with deep shadows under his eyes. His uniform was slightly different, and the name tag he wore was blank. Yeah," Thomas replied. "What's that?" He pointed to the device. The employee's gaze followed his finger, and for a moment his expression changed. His eyes widened, and he stepped closer, speaking in a low, almost whispering tone. "Don't touch that." Thomas, intrigued and feeling an odd tension in the air, laughed nervously. "Why not? It doesn't even have a label. Is it some kind of prototype?" The employee remained silent, his gaze fixed on the object. Then, with an unsettling calmness, he said, "You won't like what happens if you do." Thomas felt a shiver run down his spine, but shrugged it off. He wasn't one to let something like this intimidate him. "All right, I'll take your word for it." As he turned to walk away, the employee suddenly grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Don't leave," the man hissed. "You need to leave now. It's too late. It's already too late." Thomas yanked his arm free and backed away, his heart racing. The employee didn't move, just stood there, staring at him. Something felt terribly wrong. He quickly made his way toward the front of the store, but as he reached the exit, he glanced back one last time. To his horror, he saw the employee standing in the same spot, but now a group of figures stood behind him, each one wearing the same blank name tag, their faces as pale as death, eyes hollow and vacant. The lights above them flickered violently, casting deep shadows across the store, and for a brief moment, Thomas thought he saw them move. His chest tightened as he stepped through the door and into the daylight. He never returned to that Apple store again. Months later, Thomas learned that there had been a fire in the store a few years back, something the company had never publicized. The incident was blamed on faulty wiring, but rumors swirled about the strange disappearance of several employees that night. No one spoke of it, and the store's records were wiped clean. To this day, Thomas still wonders whether the eerie, pale figures were the souls of those who vanished, trapped within the store's walls, forever haunting the place, waiting for the next curious soul to cross their path.
Story number 2.
It was just another late-night shift for Sarah at the downtown Apple Store. The mall was closed, and the only remaining people were the employees, cleaning up and preparing to head home. Sarah had grown used to the quiet after hours. The fluorescent lights hummed above her, casting a dull glow over the sleek white walls of the store. She liked this time. It was peaceful, almost meditative. But tonight was different. As she walked past the rows of shiny products, she noticed something odd in the back corner of the store. A single MacBook was open, its screen glowing with a blank document. The store had been empty for hours, and she was certain no one had been back there after the last customer left. She approached the desk, puzzled. Her first instinct was to close the laptop and lock it away, but something made her hesitate. The document on the screen was empty, but there was a flashing cursor as though someone was about to type something. Before she could touch it, a soft sound echoed in the store, a faint clicking noise, like the sound of a keyboard being typed on. But the screen remained blank. Sarah glanced around, wondering if one of her colleagues had come back in, but the store was silent except for the hum of the lights. Her pulse quickened as she took a step closer, reaching for the laptop. Then, without warning, the screen flickered, and words started to appear. Sarah! She froze. Her name spelled out in front of her. There was no mistaking it. The laptop was typing, but there was no one there. Her hands trembled as she backed away. The words continued. We're watching you. The store suddenly felt colder, and the air grew heavy, suffocating. A strange unease settled in her stomach. The cursor blinked again, and more words appeared. You shouldn't be here. It's too late. Sarah's heart raced as she looked around, desperate for someone to explain what was happening. The room seemed to close in on her, and for a split second, she thought she saw shadows moving along the walls. Her breath caught in her throat. The typing stopped. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the silence. She pulled it out, still shaking, and looked at the screen. The notification was from the store's security system, an alert that the alarm had been triggered. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She quickly glanced back at the laptop, but the screen was blank once more. The buzzing in her pocket continued. She swiped to open the message, but as soon as she did, a chilling voice crackled through the store's intercom system. Get out! It was the voice of the store manager, but it sounded off, distorted, like something was wrong, something unnatural. It sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could react, the front doors slammed shut, locking themselves with a force that rattled the entire store. Sarah ran to the door, tugging at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Her breath quickened as panic set in. She stumbled back, her eyes darting around the room. Suddenly, the lights above flickered, and a series of loud bangs echoed through the store, like footsteps in the dark. It was then that she noticed the figures, standing motionless in the shadows, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. Their faces were obscured, but there was something deeply wrong about them. They didn't move, didn't speak. They just watched her. In a daze, Sarah rushed to the back of the store, hoping to find another exit. The security doors there were locked too. As she turned to look over her shoulder, the figures had begun to move, slowly, deliberately, their heads turning in unison to follow her every movement. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a new message. It's too late, Sarah. You're ours now. The last thing Sarah saw was the cold, dead stare of the figures as they closed in on her. The next morning, the store opened as usual. Employees reported no unusual occurrences. The laptop was gone. The back corner was empty, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. Some say she vanished into the very walls of the store, while others claim they've heard her voice late at night, calling for help. But no one has ever seen her again. The Apple Store, once just a place of technology and innovation, is now rumored to hold something far more sinister within its walls. Something that waits for the next person who dares to stay too late.
Story number 3.
It was a rainy evening when the storm caused the power to flicker in the Apple Store. The street lights outside went out one by one, casting the area into total darkness. Inside, the glow from the product displays was all that illuminated the store. Ellie, a new employee working the late shift, didn't mind the quiet. She had heard rumors about strange happenings after hours, but she had always dismissed them as mere stories to spook the newbies. The manager had left for the night, leaving her alone in the vast store. The air felt thick and oppressive, the quiet amplified by the occasional crack of thunder outside. Ellie was sitting at the front counter, cleaning up some paperwork, when the lights suddenly blinked out, plunging the store into complete darkness. For a moment, Ellie froze, listening to the silence. But then she heard something, the faint sound of tapping. She thought it might be the rain against the windows, but the tapping grew louder. It was coming from somewhere inside the store. Ellie grabbed her flashlight and cautiously made her way down the aisles, the beam of light trembling as she moved. The tapping continued, rhythmic, almost deliberate. It wasn't the sound of rain. As she reached the back of the store, the tapping stopped. Ellie's heart raced as she scanned the area, looking for the source of the noise. She moved cautiously toward the repair desk, where an old MacBook sat open on the counter. The screen was black, but the keyboard was moving, slowly, like someone was typing. Ellie's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the keys, but no one was there. The keys continued to press, letters appearing on the screen by themselves. Ellie. The screen displayed in cold, stark letters. Ellie's mind raced. How could this be? No one else was in the store, and the keyboard was moving by itself. Her eyes widened in horror as more words appeared on the screen. "We're watching you." The temperature in the room dropped, and Ellie's breath became visible in the freezing air. She swung her flashlight around, expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, but the store was still empty. The tapping began again, this time from a different part of the store. It sounded as though someone was walking, dragging their feet slowly along the floor. Terrified, Ellie ran back to the front, but the door was locked. No one could get in. The sound of footsteps was getting closer, almost as if someone were behind her. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling, but there was no answer. The store was empty, yet it felt suffocating. The tapping grew louder, now surrounding her from all directions. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Ellie reached for it with shaking hands, praying it was the manager coming to check in. But as she opened the message, the screen went black, then blinked back to life, displaying a chilling message. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Her heart dropped. The front door, the one she thought had locked itself, was now wide open, the wind howling through it. Her flashlight flickered and died, leaving her in pitch-black darkness. Without thinking, Ellie bolted out of the store into the rain-soaked night. The moment she stepped outside, the door slammed shut behind her with an eerie finality. She didn't look back, but the faint sound of typing echoed in her mind. The next morning, the store was back to normal. The lights worked and the door was locked. But the computer on the repair desk had a new, unsettling message on its screen. "Next time, you'll stay." Ellie never returned to that Apple store. She couldn't bring herself to, and no one has seen her since. The store continues to operate as usual, but employees say there's a strange, cold energy that lingers, especially after hours. If you listen closely, you can still hear the tapping.
Story number 4.
It was just after closing time when a man named Henry walked into the Apple store, drenched from the relentless downpour outside. He hadn't meant to stay, but his car had broken down, and he sought refuge in the only place that was still open. The store was eerily quiet, with only a few dim lights remaining on. The employees had already left, or so it seemed, and Henry figured he'd wait for the rain to die down. He wandered through the rows of sleek, white devices, admiring the products, but something about the atmosphere felt off. The silence was oppressive, and the emptiness of the store made it feel even stranger. The lights flickered, but he assumed it was just due to the storm outside. As Henry explored the store, he noticed something peculiar. A small door in the back, just behind one of the rows of displays. He had never noticed it before. It was small, almost hidden, and it seemed out of place in a store like this. He walked over to it, curiosity getting the better of him. The door was slightly ajar. Something stirred in the back of his mind, an instinct to leave, but he couldn't resist. He pushed the door open. It led into a narrow, dimly lit hallway. The air inside was thick, and it smelled faintly of something old, like dust and mildew. The walls were lined with faded posters from past product launches, the images faded and worn from years of neglect. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly in front of him, but it also felt as though the walls were closing in around him. Henry hesitated for a moment, but then decided to continue. He was too far in to back out now. As he walked down the corridor, the walls seemed to warp, distorting his sense of space and distance. He felt as though the store had become a maze and he was losing his way. Suddenly, the hallway ended in front of a large, rusted metal door. It looked ancient, completely out of place in the sleek, modern store. A sign hung above it, but the letters were too faded to make out. The door was ajar as well, revealing a dark room beyond. Henry felt a strange pull to enter, as if something was beckoning him. With a shaky breath, he stepped inside. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the store. It was a large, empty space filled with old, obsolete Apple products, devices that had been long forgotten. There were old iMacs, floppy disks, and even older models of the iPod that looked as though they hadn't been touched in years. But there was one thing that stood out among the relics: a large, sleek black box in the center of the room, unlike anything Henry had seen before. He approached it cautiously, drawn to it despite the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. The black box had no labels, no logos. It was just there. Before he could get any closer, the lights in the room flickered, and for a brief moment, the walls seemed to pulse. The temperature dropped suddenly, and Henry shivered. Then a low hum started to fill the room, a strange mechanical sound that sent chills down his spine. It was coming from the box. A voice, soft and distorted, suddenly crackled through the air, as though it were coming from the box itself. Henry, he froze, his blood running cold. How did it know his name? The voice repeated, this time more insistent. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have opened the door. Henry stepped back, panic rising in his chest. He turned to leave, but the door had vanished. The walls around him seemed to close in, the room becoming smaller and smaller with each passing second. The hum grew louder, and Henry could hear something moving behind him. He turned, but there was nothing there, only the black box, its surface gleaming ominously in the dim light. A sound echoed from the far corners of the room, a sound like 1,000 whispers, all calling his name at once. Henry, Henry, Henry. In a blind panic, he bolted toward the wall, slamming his hands against it, but it was no use. It felt like the room itself was alive, shifting and moving, trapping him in its endless maze. The last thing he heard before the world went black was the voice again, this time more chilling than ever. You're part of the collection now. When the authorities arrived hours later, the Apple Store was completely locked up and no sign of Henry remained. His car was still parked outside, the rain now having subsided. But the employees who returned in the morning reported something odd. A new product had appeared in the back room, sitting on the shelf among the vintage items. A sleek black box, unmarked and untouched, waiting for the next curious soul to discover it. The store continues to operate as normal, but no one talks about the back room. If you happen to wander into that Apple Store after hours, you might just hear the faint hum of the black box, waiting for its next victim.